Thanks for downloading this episode of On the Record Online with Eric Schwartzman, the podcast about how technology is changing the world of communications. To subscribe to the podcast or share feedback, visit us online at ontherecordpodcast.com, on Twitter at ontherecord, or send email to ontherecordpodcast@gmail.com.
If you're interested in tech news, you're going to find this episode very interesting. If you're a media relations professional who works in tech, you've just hit the mother lode. In this podcast, Cathy Brooks, who currently handles marketing for Draper Fisher Jurvetson backed Israeli mobile search app provider DoAT, interviews All Things D co-editor Kara Swisher about her tech blog's personality, the hamsterization of journalism, balancing accuracy against speed in the quest to be first, and what makes All Things D different from other tech news outlets. She also talks about the recent scandal at News Corp's News of the World and just how well Rupert Murdoch follows what's going on at All Things D. She talks about Arianna Huffington's shill for higher standards in journalism while excluding AOL employee Michael Arrington from their corporate policy that restricts bloggers from investing in companies they cover. And she talks about the New York Times consumer technology reporter David Pogue getting reprimanded for speaking at a PR conference. And this interview was recorded at a PR conference. I think you're going to enjoy it. Listen up.
So I'm Cathy Brooks. Until recently, I was an independent consultant helping small and large companies with storytelling. A startup has made an honest woman out of me. I am now heading up strategic relationships for a company called DoAT. Oh, look, I'm wearing their T-shirt. An Israeli startup, but today is not about that. Today is about Kara Swisher. Who, all right, how many of you guys here read All Things D? Yeah. There you go. Applause. Excellent. If your hand didn't go up, you're so in trouble. Or you're lying, which is just not right. So if you don't know who Kara Swisher is, she is one of the leading journalists in the tech industry. Been covering tech since before it was like for a while. You were only 2 or 3 when you got started, though.
No, I'm quite old. The early 90s.
So let's talk a little bit about online media. So you were old school journalist, worked in a newspaper, have evolved into the world of the digital realm. You're now really a blogger.
Yes, indeed.
But a journalistic blogger. So talk a little bit about how that's evolved.
It's interesting to use the term blogging. Just recently, I hate to say toot something, but we won, the All Things Digital won the Loeb Award for blogging, actually, this year for my coverage of Yahoo's earnings. I live blog Yahoo's earnings reports, and Carol Bartz provides such ridiculous material that I won. So I thanked her when I won the award. But it was separate from the other awards. There were other awards for enterprise reporting and stuff like that, but they had a separate designation for blogging, which I thought was unusual, and I actually said so in the thing, is that these were reported, what we do in All Things Digital, reported news. We break news all the time. And so I wondered, as much as I enjoy my giant crystal globe, that I wondered why there was a separate category for blogging, as if it's some weird stepchild or crazy cousin in the closet. So I had a long discussion with the people at UCLA who monitor the awards, but it's the same thing at the Pulitzers and everything else. There are separate designations for online.
Do you think that's going to change, though?
I think it has to. It has to. And so I consider myself a blogger. I'm very proud to be called a blogger, but I think what is happening is that it's morphing into just regular journalism. For most people who do quality, standards-based, ethically strong work, it's the same thing as what I was doing at the Wall Street Journal for a decade, and the same thing I was doing at the Washington Post a decade before. It's not much different, except that it's faster. It has a little more attitude and personality. And it's, I think it's better, actually, what we're doing.
Well, I mean, you come from a strong media background and training, organizations where ethics, integrity, things like fact checking,
right?
Making sure that you are actually telling a story that's a real story, that you're not just writing fiction.
Right.
So that's your background, and you have assembled a team of people at All Things D who carry that same belief. That's not necessarily the case, though. I mean, when you look across the industry, you have people who are bloggers with no experience.
Right.
Who
that doesn't
grow
mean
into
they're not
it.
good. That doesn't mean they're not good.
So talk a little bit about that line, because a blogger can be a journalist not necessarily a blogger.
Well, it's an interesting thing because some people think in blogging, in the blogging category, that you just put up with that last thing you heard and then you can correct it as time goes on, and the self-correction of the internet is fine, and should just put up what you hear. I am not, be transparent, say that you aren't sure if this is true, or the sources may not be good, and that's good enough. And I think I use an expression: transparency can cover up a lot of crimes. It's just, I think it's irresponsible. It's like gossiping, it's like gossiping and posting it, and sometimes it can have profound effects. Most of the time, it's not a big effect, and it's usually just these things move so quickly, it doesn't really matter because they do get corrected by other journalists. But what we're doing in All Things D is not that. We don't post things that we aren't absolutely certain are going to happen, that we haven't done adequate reporting on, that we haven't gotten 2 or 3 sources. Just your basic stuff. It's not really very difficult. And so what we're going for is we have the belief that people care about accuracy and people care about fairness. People care that we're not bullying people, we're not threatening people to get stories. We don't have agendas beyond simply writing the stories. And so that's our bet, that people believe in that. I think people, with the noise and the internet, that they care about accurate sources of trusted information. I do. I know when I read about things, I really do care if I feel as if it's accurate. So that's our bet. And it's the same thing that they're doing at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or other places, is that there's a very great care when we post things, that we don't just rush up and write anything. And other people can do whatever they want. I mean, I don't really care. I always say I don't give a fuck. Who cares? But I don't think it's not great for journalism, but that's not journalism. I'm not sure what to call it. But it's what it is. And what happens is, whenever I say this, all the different tweet people go crazy. How dare she say what journalism is? Well, too bad. I'm going to say what I think journalism is, and they can define it at anything they want. But they go crazy every time I say this, which seems they should get a life. I have children and a nice family, and I have a life, not to argue about what journalism is. But I think we all know what journalism is, and if they are doing something else, and they should, it's interesting because they go. Some people, not everybody. There's some wonderful people in blogging. They go crazy.
That's like saying some of my best friends are bloggers.
But no, I am a blogger. They get angry when you try to tell them what to do. I mean, it reminds me of my 8-year-old sometimes. Like, don't tell me what to do, Mom. I think I will tell you what to do. I mean, it's just a ridiculous argument. Don't tell me not to take this knife and shove it in my brother, kind of thing. I think I will. I think I shall advise you on that issue. So, whatever. Journalism. People know what good journalism is. Period. It may be changing, getting more interesting, but they know what it is.
What about the pace of the news cycle? It's changed dramatically.
Well, that's what's changed. Yeah,
so talk a little bit about that and how it changes the way that you digest, gather information, and then actually put it out. Well,
people think it makes you less thoughtful. I think that's probably true. We do respond. I'm trying to get my staff not to be so responsive to every little stupid thing that comes out, every dumb funding of some silly startup. You know what I mean? That's not. I want them to give people more of an analysis, and it's almost like printing press releases. We want to have more of a context and more of a this means this kind of thing. And I encourage them to go out and meet people. I don't want them to get sucked up into the sort of hamster wheel. There's a thing called hamsterization of journalism that people are just doing. That's the term, and it's true. Actually, you really do have to respond. I mean, I just was in the back. There was a report on CNBC that Groupon had delayed its IPO, when in fact it hadn't delayed its IPO.
Well, that's an example of an old school media organization getting something really just wrong.
There's been questions around Groupon's IPO, but they had always planned mid-September, and the headline was, then they have since amended the head. They may delay their IPO. Well, they may, take a rocket ship to the Mars, but I'm not sure if that's the case, And so, I did some reporting. I'm like, oh, really? That's an interesting story. And then once I started reporting it wasn't true at all. And so I wrote not so much on the delay, but the SEC scrutiny is still a drag, But, that's the that was a speedy thing. And we had to do it quickly. And when I was at the Journal, we certainly wouldn't have done it that way. We just wouldn't have even written anything, or we would have taken a long time and taken 4 or 5 days to do.
Well, and in the old days, you had to wait for the paper to come out the next morning anyway.
5 o'clock. There was always a 5 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the East Coast. Yeah, there was like a 5 o'clock deadline here. So everything was done on the timing of the newspaper and not the timing of people's interest in news. And so, we did things at our own pace, and that's not the case anymore. Readers really want stuff immediately. They want it right away. They want to hear reaction. They want stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a different pace. I don't sleep a whole lot as much as I used to. But I
think the kids probably help with that too.
They take up much less of my time than blogging does. But they don't care about me anymore. They've just turned like 6 and 9. So they're like, oh, Mom, go away. So no, they're great kids. But they are. But you know how they are. Kids get they don't want their mom around. So my 9-year-old's more interested in Katy Perry these days than me. So which is the way it goes. This is inevitable.
We'll have to help him with that decision.
She's very attractive, so I understand the situation. Certain parts of her are very attractive more than others for him. So anyway,
this is the late day panel conversation.
So
we'll talk about this after
anyway,
cocktail
the
hour.
pace is ridiculous. It's really crazy. But I'm trying to get my reporters not to react so much, and I give them 1 day off a week, each of them, to do enterprise pieces, longer pieces. They take some time, they report them, and they get a full day. I don't expect them to be going to the movies during these days. I expect them to really think hard about their beats and what the big stories are and what they should be pursuing.
When you talk about iterating a story, one of the other issues with the way the stream moves, the way the news stream moves, you talk about context and having your staff do more thoughtful, contextually based writing. What about following stories? Because obviously the flow of information, the sheer volume of stuff that has to be covered is exponentially larger than it used to be.
Yeah.
So how do you mitigate that against also wanting to make sure that within their beat they are following stories through and carrying them through the second and third day?
We try to break stories, actually. We don't try to follow stories. So, they have to watch the major companies on their beat, just like I did at the Wall Street Journal or anywhere else. You follow the major news events. But the question is, what's a news event? Some of this stuff is made up news event. You know what I mean? Silly little things. And so we treat them in the context. So we have we have these things called bites that we just do a short piece on. But we're not a press release organization for startups or companies and stuff like that. And so we'll put it in its context, and we try it by size or the amount of attention. It just depends on what the story is. And some of it is ephemeral and some of it is important. We don't want to get, there's a very bad tendency in just general journalism to be, to just do a series of mundane stories. I call it incrementalism, where you do there was a guy I worked with years ago that used to do every single story on telecom, but he never was the greatest reporter in telecom, not because of lack of work, because he just wrote every silly little incremental story, and you never understood the sweep of what telecom was doing to the society, and so you have to have that idea of sweep and what the bigger story is, what it means for readers, because it's confusing to read one little news story after the next. And we don't, I think it's, I encourage my reporters not to get sucked up into incrementalism and have no meaning to what they're writing about.
So we are in a room, we're at the PR Summit. Hi, everybody. So assuming that how many people here are with an agency, a large or mid-size or even a boutique agency? How many people are independent in the PR realm? How about on the corporate side? Okay. How many people were just walking by and saw the cinnamon buns and thought it was a good idea to just kind of come in? Okay. They are actually really good. So obviously, PR people are a vital part of the equation, both good and bad for media people. How has your relationship with the PR community changed, and how do you see the tools that they're using or not using being a benefit to you?
I have a good relationship with most PR people. I think most of them are pretty good. Some are incompetent, but it's just like journalists or anyone else. They have to be faster. I think they're struggling with the things around embargoes and things like that. I just wish they'd release everything to everyone at once. This whole weird embargo thing is strange, and it always gets fucked up. So, but in general, they're pretty good about providing information pretty quickly. It hasn't changed a whole lot. It's just there's more people. I'm sure they have a headache of having to deal with lots and lots of people. It's definitely shifted from. It used to be when we were at the Wall Street Journal, they just gave us the stuff first. They just handed it to us, and that's the dirty little secret of big newspapers is we got to handle a lot of stuff. But now they hand us a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they give it to other organizations. I prefer that we all get it at once because then we can all have our own take on it, and we rise or fall based on the quality of how we're covering it. But I suspect they're just being inundated and pecked to death by so many different people now. I would assume it's exhausting. But I still think it counts the way it did before, is that you go to trusted, really good journalists and you deal with them, and they set the tone for everybody else. Because I think if you have good relationships with a number of high quality journalists, you'll do fine. I mean, there's all that sorts of back and forth on who you should go to and things like that. But it seems like these days, if you give it to one person, everybody knows about it, and everybody tends to follow it once it's out there. So
embargoes are embargoes just really a waste of time?
They exhaust me. They always break, so it's kind of silly. But some things I'd like to know about in advance and get a briefing so you really understand a product. Especially product things, it's like you can't really write about something without seeing it. And so in those cases, it's really useful to see things in advance. In some cases, it's stupid. Like these funding stories. I'm going to bar them from our site soon because they're so silly and they mean nothing. Unless they're like these ridiculous massive fundings. And then you could write a story about ridiculous massive fundings. But, some of them are just not silliness. And then some of them are good. It just, again, I think you should have good relationships with journalists who prove themselves to be high quality and act professionally. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. But
we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, Kara's going to talk about just how hands-on a CEO, Rupert Murdoch, is. She'll talk about who's in charge at AOL, Arianna Huffington or Mike Arrington. And she'll also discuss a event where New York Times consumer technology reporter David Pogue was reprimanded for speaking at a PR conference. Stay with us.
I see a lot of mid-level and senior-level managers at all sorts of corporations and organizations around the country who are my age, I'm in my early 50s and older, who don't understand still what it is or its power or its importance in communicating with internal, external audiences, with customers, with members, with whomever the audience, the media, with legislators, with whomever the audience might be. And they just sort of discount its importance. And, I think that's one big hurdle that still has to be cleared here for organizations, senior management to really understand and then embrace it, and then really understand how to apply it to their audiences and to their circumstances. I think that's really the big hurdle still.
We went to the lunches where it's just a presentation and you see how important social media is. But the thing is, people would always walk away and say, where do we go from here? I'm completely lost. They say a blog is good and an RSS feed is good, but what do we do? It's important, but then someone from your company is going to have to learn how to do it. So if you don't do it, then who's going to do it for you?
So if you're ready to bring your laptop, log on, and learn how to actually use social media, join me for my hands-on training tour presented by Social Media Today. In September 2011, I'll be visiting Sydney, Singapore, London, Paris, Toronto, New York City, Chicago, and San Francisco. Bring your laptop to our computer training facility, log on, and get real-world experience using social media for serious business. There's only 30 slots per city. To sign up, go to www.socialmediabootcamp.com. Let's go back to the podcast. We're listening to Cathy Brooks, who currently handles marketing for Draper Fisher Jurvetson backed Israeli mobile phone search app provider DoAT, and she's interviewing All Things D co-editor Kara Swisher.
We talked a little bit earlier about ethics and transparency, and you are about as transparent
Indeed.
as, I mean, your disclaimer, your disclosure on your blog is it feels like it's pages long.
It is
you
pages
explain
long.
that your partner works at Google.
We're trying to numb you into submission, really, with the amount of information.
It works.
Yeah,
actually, it hurts a little bit. But ethics and News Corporation.
Yeah. Oh, yes. They should use our disclosure statement.
Your parent company.
I cannot defend what happened in Britain. It's appalling. It's just appalling. Even if 20% of what they're saying is true, it's just appalling. And it goes, the highest executive, especially that one editor, News International, Rebecca Brooks.
No relation to me, by the way.
Clearly, if she didn't know, should have known. There's some sort of ethics happening there, or lack of ethics, that caused these reporters, and it was widespread. It was not a rogue person, not just at News International, but all over the British tabloid system, to think this was okay. And it's not. It's not okay. And it's definitely, I got the 900 emails from different CEOs of companies saying, "Oh, now I know how you got your scoops," which I'm like, "Oh, screw you." But it's not great to have that as a corporate thing. I can say they have.
Have you talked to Rupert about this?
No, he's a little busy right now. But I can tell you he's as sharp as a tack, despite that appearance at the hearing. Sorry, it's not the Rupert Murdoch I met.
Well, you had him at All Things D.
He comes every year,
and he actually spoke. I think the year actually before the purchase.
Yeah.
And what amazed me was the depth of knowledge and understanding that he showed of so many of the business units.
I never turn my back on that man. I'm telling you.
So, what's the likelihood that
I don't know if he actually. I don't know. Again, it's an investigation, so I don't like to. I'm like a reporter. I don't know. I have no idea. I think someone should find out. I think someone should find out exactly what the extent of knowledge was up to the top echelons of News Corp, and take action if that indeed happened. But he's a very engaged CEO and very engaged chairman. I don't know if he knows every detail of everything. He certainly knows a lot about all things digital when I saw him recently. But the most recent
maybe
time
he's tapping your phone.
No, I hope not. There's nothing. It's so boring. It would be so dull to tap my phone. It's not great. It's really, what disappoints me is that the Journal is getting more than All Things Digital is not really that big a part of the News Corp empire. The Journal is getting, some newspapers are taking the opportunity to attack parts of Dow Jones, for example, that are terrific and really have high ethics. So that's disappointing. I'm not surprised they're doing it, but the Journal has, so far, I don't work at the Journal anymore, but I can tell you at All Things D, I've never had any meddling by anybody from News Corp ever once. So I don't ever see that kind of what they were doing in Britain, where they had very active involvement. And my impression is that they're not that the Journal is better than ever. I think it's a pretty good newspaper, and I think they're but it's different than the tabloids. The tabloid, that whole world is such a freak show. What's happening there? But it's bad. It's bad. There's no way to. It's bad and it's appalling. And the journalists who did that should be jailed if they broke laws. Yeah.
At this point, Cathy starts to take questions, but they are not mic'd. So I cut out the questions, and all you're going to hear now are the answers.
Depending on the reporter, we have reporters covering social, Liz Gaines, enterprise, Eric Hesseldahl, Peter Koff covers media and advertising, John Pascauci's a general news reporter, a lot of Apple, Ina Fried covers mobile, Tricia Duryea covers gaming and commerce. So they're very obvious what they cover, and then I cover whatever the hell I feel like, because I'm the boss. Mostly Yahoo. I'm dedicated.
That's just because Carol is so fun.
It's like Moby Dick to me. Ahab. You know how that ended. Come on, seriously. What a traffic accident.
Darcy blows?
Yeah.
There's a whole new
she's been quiet lately.
Definition.
She's been very quiet lately. We're interested in interesting things. We don't just rely on people we know. If you have an interesting company, we love to hear about it, either writing the individual reporters or me, and I will get it to the right reporters. So the biggest criteria is something super interesting. bar things because we don't know them at all. We certainly do look for people involved that we know about that has credibility, but we like it, interesting. Just this year at D, we had a demo. We have pretty big splashy demos of big, we did Windows 8 and we did stuff like that. But this year we had 2 students from the University of Pennsylvania who has this weird wireless energy, like it beams energy to your cell phone from a box wirelessly.
So like if you forget your charger, you don't have to worry.
So this was they just wrote us, and we were like, oh, that's interesting. And so we started to pursue it and look at it, and they were on stage at D, and they've since gotten funding from that. So it doesn't matter. I mean, something interesting always interests us, kind of stuff. So you don't have to be big. Oh, we're like, we're like Groupon, we're like Slash, we're like, we're a version of that kind of stuff. Sort of the copycats. Once you write a story, people think you want to write endless stories about that topic. So if you write a Groupon story, I noticed you just wrote about Groupon, so of course you'd like to write about this. And we get like 20 after every story kind of thing. So, again, we're not... there's been a lot about commerce, a lot about group commerce, but we still will write about it. It's really an interesting trend. I'm trying to think of topics that just bore the living. Whether Spotify was coming to the USA. That story went on forever. It's coming. We wrote like 9. I feel we are culpable in that situation, but. We like to try to advance stories. I guess we don't want to do Me Too stories. We want to have an interesting new way. And so a lot of people do pitch themselves as like different companies. I think you should just pitch yourself as the company you are. And I know it's sort of like, I know you're a stupid journalist, so let me try to help you out to understand our company. But just if you explain your company pretty clearly, we can, somehow muddle our way through figuring it out.
Yes, sir.
Kara, in the past, I think you told me that you guys don't do so much product news unless it's big product. And
right.
Getting away from funding news.
I just am tired of it. I don't make.
So where's your sweet spot?
I'll take back that on product news. We're going to be expanding that area quite substantially soon. It's either busy at News Corp with other things, so we were about to get the funding for it, but now they're busy in London. No, seriously.
There may be a lot of staff looking for work soon, though.
It's like the Tudors. Things stop when there's a crisis in France. There's a crisis in France, and everyone back in England has to sit tight. But it's really funny. But hopefully we'll be getting our funding. I shouldn't complain, but I'm so sick of waiting. But we're going to be adding some product reviewers to the site at some point, and we'll be doing more lots and lots of gadget product news. It's going to be part of the site, but we'll hire someone just to write about product news, and so we'll do all kinds of stuff. Again, we don't want to become a PR release. We don't want to just print. It's going to be interesting to see how we do it, and we'll have to see how it goes. So we will do more. We'll have reviewers doing games and apps. We'll do a lot more app reviews. We'll do a lot of all kinds of things. So we're excited about that. And hopefully there'll be a conference attached to it also.
So to be clear, we're talking about bloggers being paid by people to write content as opposed to being bloggers for an organization that pays them to write as a
that's an That's an advertorial. I don't know how, you read, sometimes magazines have those things from Sumatra suddenly takes the inside of Vanity Fair or something like that. But those are advertorials, and it should be disclosed, but they don't often disclose.
Or they disclose them in little.
Well, they don't disclose most of the time, and so it's horrible. It's just whatever. If people want to make money that way, as long as they say what they're doing, it's fine by me. I don't. There's lots of jobs that people have to do to make money, but they should disclose it, and readers should know what's happening. And I think the companies that hire them should make it clear. It's really, I think disclosure is really important. We do on our site, quite a bit. The getting of free materials. Walt Mossberg, my partner, is particular about this. He's very clear that he doesn't keep these things. He buys his own products. I just forked over $2,000 for a new MacBook Air, so I know about that situation. They offer you all these things for free, but you have to resist the big ticket items kind of stuff. And they, we don't, whatever with that, but they should disclose it. I don't know what to say. I have been on the record rather stringently talking about bloggers who make investments in startups, and I wrote quite a scathing column. Oh, I got...
Let's talk a little more about that.
Well, I wrote a story saying that I didn't, what I had done is I called up AOL and asked if they were aware that Arrington was making investments. And of course, they didn't get back to me, and Arrington wrote a screed the next day saying, I've decided to invest again, without disclosing that I had called or there were inquiries and stuff. And so as I thought about it, the more I thought about it, because he had not been investing before now, then he changed his mind. And when I first contacted AOL, they had no idea he was doing it. You know what I mean? Like Tim Armstrong, who's the COO, I said, he's investing? He goes, I didn't know. Like, of course they didn't know. They didn't know. They could have just said, we didn't know, but now we have a new policy. But I decided instead to focus on Arianna Huffington, who's been on the record, who I like very much, and I consider a friend, but who has been on the record talking about standards of journalism and raising them to the heights of Mount Olympus. And so I thought, well, look, Arrington always does this kind of shit, so what do I care? I think I said, don't be surprised when a fish is a fish. Oh, well, it's a fish again. What a surprise. So, but I did want to take issue with her because she had gone on and on about journalistic ethics. And what was appalling to me is that she came out with a policy that said then, which they didn't send to me again, which is just a little back and forth. They just want to screw with people who actually ask them legitimate questions. But they put out a policy that said no blogger or writer for AOL can make investments in anything they cover except Michael Arrington, which is sort of like saying murder is wrong, except this guy, he can shoot whoever he likes. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just one of these things. It's not a policy if you break it immediately. And, they were pretzeling themselves to deal with a situation of a very influential blogger who has some of the site is tremendously good, who makes a lot of money for them, and they spend a lot of money on, so they wanted to keep him. So whatever, but they didn't say that. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I just... he makes an argument that if he's transparent about it, it's fine. He then attacked me for being married to someone who works at Google, and I'm actually quite not nice to Google, so it's kind of an interesting, weird psychodrama going on there. But my response was, I can only marry one person, and actually not really, because I'm gay, so I can't marry anyone at all.
Can in Canada.
I suppose. Nobody cares about what the Canadians think.
Iowa.
Yeah, but you really can't. Honestly, it's not real. It's not real. It's like fake marriage, I hate to tell you, because you don't have federal rights. But I'm not going to go on about that. It's very pretty, though. I'm glad they can have enjoying whatever. But federal law matters. But my point was that I don't benefit financially from Meghan, and our finances are completely separate, and it's very disclosed. I mean, they're completely separate. I don't get any of her money. She doesn't use any of my money. It's very separate.
Well, and you also, in terms of even talking about, like, she'll go on a trip and you know that she's going to a certain part of the world, but you don't know what she's doing. But you don't know what she's doing. Yeah.
So it's a very, you can speculate all you want about it, but there's just, we're either lying or we're not lying. I say she does not tell me anything, and if she does, I put it in the blog. Only one time I did that, when she was involved in the Facebook negotiations. I'd been breaking a lot of stories about Facebook talking to both Google and Microsoft, and she suddenly appeared in the negotiation, and she, of course, didn't tell me, and I found out about someone else, and I immediately put up a post saying, she's involved, I'm out until it's finished. So we've been very strict about that, and I can only marry, again, one person. I can't make 123 investments in small startups and then say you're going to be fair. And maybe you can be. It just creates all kinds of whatever. I guess if you're transparent, I wouldn't do it, but whatever. I just think it makes, I don't know. I wouldn't do it. But then,
can I get a hallelujah?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just strange. There's going to be, what happens to the people that compete with that company they're investing in? If this person's the boss of that person, don't they have some influence on them? Are they? Well, that's another story. Whatever. If you want to put up with that shit, go right ahead. I don't understand why you do, but we won't be yelling at you unnecessarily at all. And if they do, if anyone at All Things Digital yells at any of you in a mean way, like a legitimate way, it's fine. But if anyone ever has a tantrum for All Things, you let me know, because I don't put up with that shit. So
good parenting.
I don't, exactly.
It's good parenting.
That's right. Smack. But they wouldn't do it. They're professionals. I don't know enough about what happened there, but I read the ombudsman stuff for sure, for closely. I was surprised he was doing that. That's a little bit over the line. If what the ombudsman of the New York Times said was accurate, which I think it was, I don't think he should have been doing that. That seems advising PR clients seems not something like, I can't imagine Walt ever. Sometimes Walt says, I hate that shit. You know what I mean? But it's not advising. He's saying, I'm about to tell you it sucks, so you can change it or not. It's up to you. But being paid to help companies improve their products or improve their pitches, just not so much. People do it, again, whatever. It's a big, crazy world out there, but it's unethical. So, we consider it unethical, and we're not trying to look our nose down at the New York Times or anyone else, but I don't think the New York Times was aware of that at the time. And he stopped, right? That's correct?
I think the agreement is because he's a contractor.
I know, but that's bullshit.
He works. Tell them where he's going to be speaking.
Oh, the speaking is different. It's interesting because we don't. I get paid not very often for speaking because it creates all kinds of weird conflicts. Unless it's like the meat packers of Nebraska, which has no link to tech. Like, okay, fine, I'll come. I don't eat meat, so I probably wouldn't do that. But I think it creates so much confusion, and it's fine to get paid for a speech and things like that. But I think in that case, he was actually advising PR people. That was different. Giving speeches, whatever, it's fine, whatever he wants to do. But you just have to make sure you're not getting money from Microsoft to talk up at Microsoft and you write about Microsoft. That's not good. That's not probably something, but these things are case-by-case basis. But I suspect the New York Times has really tremendously good ethical guidelines. From what I understand, I've read them.
All the Jason Blair stuff.
They do. They have great guidelines. They're a great newspaper. But I think this whole contract or whatever, his stuff appears in the paper and he works for them, so he should adhere to their guidelines. He's a very nice guy. I think nobody was monitoring him, and perhaps they should have been doing when they got some complaints, because they've had previous complaints about this. They probably should have done something. He's a very good reviewer, though. I think he's quite fair. But again, we would never get paid by PR people to give advice. It's just, maybe in my next career, I'll do that, but I doubt it. I think I'd feel all dirty. Anyway.
And on that note, thank you, Kara. It's always such a pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to On the Record Online with Eric Schwartzman, the podcast about how technology is changing the world of communications. To subscribe to the podcast or share feedback, visit us online at ontherecordpodcast.com, on Twitter at ontherecord, or send email to ontherecordpodcast@gmail.com. On the Record Online is hosted by Eric Schwartzman, an independent online communications consultant whose clients include the U.S. Department of State, the United States Marine Corps, the U.S. Embassy of Greece, the Government of Singapore, Johnson & Johnson, Toyota, Southern California Edison, the Environmental Defense Fund, and dozens of small to medium-sized organizations. For information about engaging Eric Schwartzman as a speaker, social media trainer, or digital strategist, visit www.ericschwartzman.com or send email to eric@ericschwartzman.com.